Are you in a relationship where there is constant friction and disagreement? Or are you not in a relationship at all and it seems like you'll never find the one? Or maybe your personal relationship is great, but things aren't going so well in friendships or at work. I figured out that for us to have happiness in relationships, we have to know the bare minimum that we can't live without. Not quite sure where I'm going with this? Don't worry, by the end of the episode, you'll have it figured out. Oh, and if you didn't hear my episode last week, please go back and listen. I shared my miracle morning routine that I've adopted from the book The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. I believe in the miracle morning routine so much that I'll be giving away a free copy of the book. To enter into the drawing, simply email me and let me know that you've left a review for this podcast and shared the podcast with a friend who could benefit. The email address is contact@lizaguerimd.com, and I'll put that in the show notes. Plus, if you refer the podcast to 10 or more friends, I'll enter your name 10 times into the drawing. The drawing will take place on November 16th, 2022. Now, are you ready to shift your mindset and tap into the opportunities that are waiting for you right now? Let's go. Welcome to the Creating Clarity podcast, where we talk all about clearing the fog, shifting our focus, and uncovering the opportunities that are hidden right in front of us. I'm your host, Dr. Liz Aguirre. Before I begin, I must emphasize that this work is separate from my professional medical work and does not represent medical advice or opinions of any specific organization. I kind of feel that I got lucky finding my husband, and he truly is a gem. And if you know me personally, you've probably heard me say that my husband is in saint status in our house because he really is that amazing. And this is something that I tend to steer away from in conversation. And a lot of times, when I would hear people talking or complaining or how do you do it, I wouldn't really want to talk about it because I didn't want people to feel like I was showing off and just gloating about my relationship, especially when other people around me were struggling. So, I would tend to just kind of keep things to myself. But as time has gone on, I've realized that, sharing kind of some of the secrets to our relationship probably can help other people. Not that our relationship is perfect, because of course, every single relationship has an opportunity to grow and evolve in time. And quite honestly, if I didn't find ways to work and improve on my relationship, then I think that it probably wouldn't be going so great. So it's something that I'm constantly aware of and working on. And again, I'm very, very fortunate that I found a husband who's aligned with my way of thinking. So, how did that happen? How did I get here? Well, to be honest with you, I've gone through my fair share of relationships that didn't go so well. And the big question is, well, why did they end? Whose fault was it? Well, it's not necessarily any one person's fault, first of all. And second of all, even though some of those relationships ended because of a cheating boyfriend, that's still not the reason they ended. They ended because we weren't right for each other. Honestly, the cheating was doing me a favor because then I was not ending up with someone who was not aligned with me. But I didn't realize that at the time. Somewhere along the line, though, I figured it out. I figured it out well before I met my husband. So, true story, I watched that movie 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. When I watched that movie, I don't know how it happened, but something made me realize that I was settling. I wasn't continuing my relationship search and dating to find the perfect partner because I didn't think that way at the time. Instead, I was dating someone and then I would ultimately settle for good enough. Maybe we had a really fun date, or the person was really good looking, and we had fun when we went out to meet up with some friends and they were good company. And then ultimately that would continue. We would start dating until, yeah, things went south, right? But after watching that movie, I realized I was kind of settling. And so I told myself, you know what? this is a great idea. I'm going to go on 50 first dates. And, I was living in a small town at the time, not my hometown, but another small town where I did my training. And honestly, there was not a lot of options. First of all, I was really busy, and who had time to go out and look for dates? But there was also not a lot of options, or I didn't see them at the time. So I thought, ooh, well, I'll do online dating because everybody else is, and other people have met their partners online. Well, I can tell you it wasn't for me. I maybe made it through 8 to 10 dates. And I got to the point where I was like, I just cannot sit through another date. Because when you fill in those kind of online things, you put your best foot forward, and sometimes I think people fill those out with, what they would like to be like, not necessarily how they actually are. But yeah, so it didn't go so well. And I even made the mistake of going on second and third dates to see if maybe it went better the second time, but of course it never did. And so in my mind, I just kind of gave up. I decided that, man, I very well may not find that guy, that person. And I literally told my mom that I thought I wasn't going to get married, that I would ultimately probably end up finding a sperm donor so that I could have babies, but I didn't see myself getting married. And of course, my very Catholic mom got very upset with me saying this because that was just absolutely ridiculous. How could I say something like that? It was just, it wasn't a pleasant conversation. And ultimately, we dropped that conversation, but I was dead serious. But why did I come to that conclusion? Was there really a perfect person for me? I mean, I didn't know, but I didn't feel like it at that time. And I would tell my friends, and other people are like, when are you going to settle down? When are you going to get married? And I'd have family members that said that. Unfortunately, my parents never put that pressure on me, but I would have other people ask me that. And I don't know where this came from, but I remember thinking and ultimately saying this to other people: look, I would rather be 40 and single than 40 and divorced and starting over. Now, please don't get upset if you are a divorcee, because I do have a lot of friends that are divorced. And this just meant that I had more of a perspective of it because I knew people that were divorced. And, what they shared with me, I realized that divorce is so hard. It's one of the hardest things you can ever do, even more so if you have children involved. But I just knew I didn't want that. So, yes, I'd rather be 40 and single than 40 and divorced and starting over. So you might be wondering, well, how did the story evolve and how did this go? Well, somewhere along the line, I decided that if I was going to spend the rest of my life with someone, then I deserved to be picky. I deserved to have everything I wanted. I deserved to have the happiness forevermore. And honestly, a lot of people told me I was picky. Like, I mean, you can't expect someone to have everything you're looking for. Okay, well, maybe not. But it led me to thinking about what I really wanted. And I built a mental list in my mind. I know that people change over time. So it couldn't be something like how they looked, because, that's going to change, or even how we think changes. However, the list that I developed in my mind and what I tell people is based on core values. At the bare minimum, any person that I was going to invest my time in from now on had to meet all of my core values, not some, all of my core values. Sometimes when I would meet someone, I went on a date, I didn't know if they were fully going to, meet all those core values. So, yes, sometimes I had to go on a date to figure it out, but as soon as I figured out that we weren't aligned in one of these core values, there was not a second date. No matter how fun the date was or how great it was, if I figured out that there were missing core values, there was no second date. And this was confusing for some because they're like, well, what do you mean? I thought we had a great time. And I'm like, actually, I had a really great time. That was like one of the best dates I've been on in years. However, I honestly, at the end of the day, just don't think we really connect on the things that are the most important to me. And, that's really hard to say. It's hard to have those conversations. But I was already getting older and I knew I wasn't going to waste my time dating someone who was not aligned with my core values. So, what are my core values? Well, number one on the list is family. I grew up in a small town. It is not fun to go back to that small town where there's a flashing light and a Dairy Queen and nothing else to do. So I didn't want to meet someone who is going to be resentful every time I insisted that I want to go back and see my family. So that was really important to me. They had to understand the importance of family. For example, I went on a date one time with this guy, and he actually had a really great job that was involved in the health and fitness space. And I really liked that. And we had a lot to talk about in that regard. But then he's like, yeah, my sister is a total lazy, you know what? And she's just such a couch potato and she really disgusts me. And I was like, whoa. I was like, yeah, some people struggle. And, then we changed the conversation. But for me, that violated the family core value. Like, I would never talk to someone about my family like that. Never. Like, who are we to judge? We don't know other people's struggles, especially, even our siblings, we don't know their struggles. So, that guy, even though it was a great date, we had a lot in common, I never went out with him again because he violated what I felt was a core value in family. Another example is marriage. Look, I did want to settle down and get married. So if you weren't interested in marriage and you just thought that, living together was cool and that's it, then, I have no judgment against that. I know a lot of people who do that as well. But for me, I wanted that committed marriage. Children was another important thing. I'm surprised at the number of people who do not discuss this, but honestly, not everybody wants children, and that's okay. Some people don't get that. I get it. And if you don't want children, I don't want you to have children either, because guess what? The kids can feel that. They can feel that resistance when, you were not what they wanted. So I think that's very important to be aligned there. Now, another thing is I felt like the person that I married had to have a spiritual or religious background. Now, I said, or they didn't have to be religious, they didn't have to be spiritual, they had to be one or the other. In other words, they had to believe in a higher power because I do. And that's important to me. And I didn't want to be getting into these debates about who's right and wrong about this, right? I also didn't want to be getting into these debates when I wanted to go to church. So that was important. The next one is kindness and respect for others. Again, if I am with someone who is treating someone mean or being rude, like that hurts me. I don't want to be around a person like that because you can treat me really, really great. But if you're treating the people around us in a way that's not showing love and respect, then really you can feel that. Like that is inside of you. And so the superficial love and kindness for me over time will fade and it'll be replaced with that kind of ugliness that is surfacing and being demonstrated in other people. You have to have that core value and that be important to you for you to be able to continue that in the long term. Now, again, I already mentioned physical health, and that's because really health is wealth. I say this a lot. I post about this on social media. For me, I feel like the physical health and our physical body is the vessel that carries us through life. And I think it's important to maintain a healthy lifestyle for us to live this life to the fullest. So that's important to me. And then the last thing was education and be interested in growing and developing. And notice I did not say they had to have at least their bachelor's or at least their doctorate. Like that was not important to me. It could even be self education because to be honest with you, I know a lot of people who have never gone to college and are incredibly intelligent and well educated. Self education goes a long way. So, those were kind of my core values and the things that were really important to me. Notice I did not include a specific height, a specific look, a specific job, a specific income. I didn't include any of that because those things change over time and those are not things that are important to me. Those were not things I considered. Now, when I was dating when I was younger, did I include those things? Yeah, I I thought I was going to marry a guy that was 6'2". But in time I came to realize, I mean, that was just not important. What I did was really identify the bare minimum that I wasn't willing to live without. And anytime I was asked out, I made this mental assessment. If they didn't meet my core values, as far as I knew, of course, maybe they didn't meet them and I didn't know about it until we went on a date. But as far as I knew, if they didn't meet it from the get go, then I wouldn't even entertain a date, regardless of how good looking or how great the person seemed. But if they did meet the core values, then I told myself I was going to give the person a chance, regardless of whether I thought it was going to work out or not, as long as they met the core values. So I have one particular friend that has been a friend for a really long time. And she was talking about this guy. I want to say she met him online dating too. I don't remember. But she was saying, like, he technically checks all the boxes except that he wasn't tall enough. He was only a couple of inches taller than her. So she was like, I just cannot date someone who's only a couple inches taller than me. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We talked about this and your core values and everything else lines up. I think you should give him a chance. And so I insisted that, she at least give him a chance and not make a decision, before that. So long story short, she went on her date with this guy, and a decade later, they are still happily married despite his height. Decide what your bare minimum is. Don't settle for less. Because if you do, in time when the honeymoon phase ends, there will always be major wounds in the relationship. Because of the disconnect, that disconnect in the core values, it'll always feel like pouring salt in a wound over and over again when that conflict arises. Now, this doesn't just apply for intimate relationships. It could apply for a friendship or a job. If you're in a job where you fundamentally disagree with the work that you're doing, then, it's always going to be an unhappiness. So if there's an area in your life where you feel like you have constant friction, then I encourage you to stop and assess where the issue is. Is there a difference in the core values? And if yes, this doesn't mean that the relationship must end, but you will have to come to an agreement that you're going to agree to disagree for this specific thing. Because otherwise, you'll continue to get upset about it over and over and over again. And that's when the resentment starts to build. We have a very short time here on earth. Decide what's important to you and live a life that follows those values. That's it for today. I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe so that you won't miss the next episode. And if you like this episode, please share it with a friend and give me a 5-star review so that I can reach more people. I'll see you next week. If you are hosting a conference, think about starting the event with a mindset talk. When you help the group collectively shift their mindset, the ideas will flow and new opportunities become much more clear. Visit my website, lizagarymd.com, and fill out a contact form to learn how you can book me as a keynote speaker for your next event.
Disclaimer. The views and opinions shared here are for information and educational purposes only. They do not serve as a medical or professional advice. They do not represent any academic, medical, or professional institution or organization. If you found this helpful, don't forget to leave a 5-star review.
Thank you.